No one wanted the flawed alien woman, but a human man extended his hands to her. The marketplace of New Kepler smelled like ozone and overripe fruit, a combination that never failed to make Chloe's sinuses ache. She pressed herself against the coolness of a vendor stall's metal frame, watching the weekly chaos unfold with the detached interest of someone who had long since stopped expecting to be part of it. Overhead, the atmospheric shield flickered through its maintenance cycle, casting brief shadows across the crowd as it recalibrated against the planet's toxic upper atmosphere. No one seemed to notice except her. Then again, no one ever seemed to notice her unless they were actively trying not to. A Vendorian merchant was arguing loudly with a customer about the price of gravity-defying melons, his forearms gesticulating wildly enough that two of them accidentally activated the fruit's anti-grav function. Several melons began floating lazily toward the shield generators, and Chloe watched with mild amusement as the merchant scrambled to retrieve them before they reached the ionization field and became very expensive plasma. The customer, a squat Brellan woman with crystalline skin, seemed unbothered by the chaos she'd caused and continued haggling as though melons weren't currently achieving low orbit. Chloe's long ears twitched at the familiar sound of the transport vessel's engines. Another week, another batch of off-worlders coming to gawk at the frontier colony and pretend they were adventurous. She'd seen it 1,000 times. They'd buy some bioluminescent trinkets, take hollows standing next to the settlement's fusion reactor, like it was a tourist attraction instead of the only thing keeping them all from freezing to death, then leave with stories about how rustic and authentic everything was. She pulled her worn jacket tighter around her shoulders, knowing the mottled blue patterns on her skin were visible at the collar. A passing family of her own kind noticed, and the mother quickly steered her children to the other side of the marketplace. Subtle. Very kind. The transport's loading ramp descended with a hydraulic hiss that cut through the marketplace chatter. Chloe counted 7 crew members disembarking, most of them already scanning their data pads for the nearest bar or the cheapest lodging. Humans, from the look of them, which meant they'd probably spend the entire visit complaining about the gravity being 0.3% higher than Earth standard. She'd heard that complaint so many times she could recite it in 3 languages. But one of them had stopped walking. He stood at the base of the ramp, a lean man with skin the color of sun-baked clay and dark hair that stuck up in directions that suggested either a very deliberate style or a complete lack of mirrors on his ship. He wore a jacket covered in pockets that bulged with various instruments, and he was staring directly at her with an expression of curiosity, confusion. It was hard to tell from this distance, and Chloe wasn't about to get closer to find out. Humans who stared usually had questions, and questions led to pity, and pity made her want to test whether the atmospheric shield really could vaporize someone if they climbed high enough. The man said something to his crewmates and started walking. Toward her, through the crowd, past the floating melons, and the Vendorian merchants shouted curses and the woman selling data chips containing authentic frontier recipes that were absolutely just repackaged emergency rations. Several people turned to watch because apparently the week's entertainment quota hadn't been met by the Great Melon Incident. Chloe considered leaving. She had gotten very good at disappearing into the spaces between stalls, at becoming just another shadow in a marketplace full of them. But something in the way he moved, purposeful but not aggressive, determined but not angry, kept her frozen in place. He was close enough now that she could see his eyes were brown, warm like the soil in the botanical dome she sometimes snuck into when the night shift supervisor was drunk on Rigelian whiskey. He stopped a respectful meter away and did something she hadn't expected. He extended both hands toward her, palms up, fingers relaxed, the universal gesture of offering, of openness, of I come in peace, please don't shoot. Then he opened his mouth and murdered her language so thoroughly that it would need a funeral and possibly grief counseling. Hello, greetings. I am called Jack, human from Earth planet, he said, his accent so catastrophically wrong that he'd somehow managed to say he was a root vegetable from a dimensional void. You are beautiful standing person I wish for making acquaintance maybe? Despite everything, despite the stares and the whispers and the lifetime of being invisible, Chloe felt her lips twitch. Then horrifyingly, she felt herself smile. Then, most horrifyingly of all, she laughed. The laugh escaped before Chloe could stop it, and the sound felt foreign in her throat, like a word she'd forgotten how to pronounce. Jack's face lit up as though she'd just handed him a winning lottery ticket instead of mockery, and he grinned with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of someone who either didn't realize he'd been laughed at or didn't care. "Ah, good, yes, excellent," he continued in his mangled attempt at her language, somehow now declaring himself to be a type of cooling unit used in meat processing. "I making you happy sounds this is positive friendship beginning?" "Please," Chloe managed, switching to common tongue before he could accidentally propose marriage to a nearby trash compactor. "Please stop before you tell everyone you're a sexually transmitted disease. You just said that. Just now." Jack's eyes widened with genuine horror, and he immediately switched to common tongue himself, his voice tinged with mortified amusement. "The translation program my crew gave me was supposed to be culturally adaptive. I'm starting to think it was actually a revenge plot for when I reorganized the ship's specimen storage and accidentally put the carnivorous plants next to the sleep pods." "How many crew members did you lose?" Chloe found herself asking, and was disturbed by how natural the conversation felt. "Define lose. If you mean permanently, none. If you mean temporarily misplaced because they were running screaming through the corridors at 3 in the morning, then 4. He was still holding his hands out, she realized, as though he'd forgotten they were there. "I'm Jack, and I promise my common tongue is significantly better than whatever linguistic war crime I just committed. Also, I'm not actually a root vegetable, a cooling unit, or a disease, though after 2 months in space, my hygiene might be questionable." The marketplace had grown quieter around them, the kind of quiet that came from people pretending not to eavesdrop while absolutely eavesdropping. Chloe could feel the weight of their attention, like a physical pressure against her skin. A Vendorian child pointed at her, and its parent quickly lowered the limb while whispering something that made Chloe's ears flatten slightly against her head. Jack noticed. His easy smile faltered for just a moment, and something sharp flickered behind his eyes. He glanced at the crowd, then back at Chloe, and she watched him make a decision in real time. "So," he said, loudly enough to be heard by at least a dozen onlookers, "I'm looking for someone to show me around this magnificent establishment, preferably someone who won't let me accidentally insult any more trash compactors or propose to the local wildlife. I can offer compensation in the form of terrible jokes, slightly bruised apples from Earth, and genuinely fascinating facts about moss. I have so many facts about moss, an inappropriate number of facts about moss." "Why would anyone need facts about moss?" Chloe asked, bewildered. "Exactly the kind of questions someone should ask before agreeing to show me around, which means you're already thinking about it, which means I'm winning." Jack's grin was back, infectious and completely absurd. "Come on, I've been in space for 63 days eating rehydrated protein paste that the manufacturer legally cannot call food. Take pity on a humble botanist who just wants to see something growing that isn't actively trying to eat him." "You're a botanist?" Something in Chloe's chest did an odd little flip. "Plant research?" "Stellar flora cataloging for the Terran Botanical Archive, which sounds impressive until you realize it mostly involves me wandering around alien planets, taking samples of things and hoping they don't turn out to be sentient. I've only violated 3 interstellar sapiens treaties, which is actually below average for my department." He waggled his still extended hand slightly. "These are getting tired, by the way. I'm either offering friendship or I'm about to conduct an invisible orchestra. Your choice which one happens." Chloe looked at his hands, calloused and dirt-stained, completely unlike the pristine appearance her own people maintained. She looked at his face, open and patient, with none of the careful blankness people usually wore when they bothered to look at her at all. She looked at the crowd, watching this spectacle with expressions ranging from confusion to disapproval to the merchant whose melons had finally returned to normal gravity and was now trying to sell them at a premium as orbital tested produce. Her own hands were trembling. She could feel the scars on her palms, the mottled pigmentation that marked her as genetically compromised, as fundamentally broken. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away, to retreat to her small room in the colony's cheapest habitation block, to disappear back into the comfortable numbness of invisibility. Instead, she reached out and placed her fingers in Jack's palms. His hands closed gently around hers, warm and solid and real. The marketplace noise seemed to recede, or maybe her ears had just stopped paying attention to anything except the point of contact between them. "Hi," Jack said softly. "I'm Jack, and I'm very bad at languages, but very good at plants." "Chloe," she managed. "I'm Chloe, and I'm very good at being invisible, but apparently very bad at staying that way." "Good," Jack said. "Invisible is boring. I prefer interesting." Jack didn't let go immediately, and Chloe found herself in the unfamiliar position of not wanting him to. His thumbs were absently tracing small circles against her palms, probably unconsciously, and it occurred to her that this was the first time in approximately 4 years that someone had touched her without flinching. "So," Jack said, "about that tour. What's the most interesting thing in this marketplace that won't get me arrested or accidentally married to farm equipment?" "The bar serves drinks that are technically legal in only 2-star systems," Chloe offered, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "And the Brelin woman over there sells data chips that claim to contain ancient alien wisdom, but are actually just collections of recipes for synthetic cheese." "I love synthetic cheese," Jack said with absolute sincerity. "One time I ate so much synthetic cheese that my ship's medical AI filed a formal complaint with my employer. It cited cruel and unusual punishment to its diagnostic systems because apparently my digestive distress created readings that the AI described as medically fascinating and deeply unwelcome." Chloe felt another laugh building in her chest, and this one came easier than the first. "You're telling me you hospitalized yourself with fake cheese? I prefer to think of it as aggressively explored the boundaries of human digestive capability in the name of culinary science." My official report used different words. Words like irresponsible and why do we keep employing him and please stop sending us incident reports. We've run out of filing space. He finally released her hands but stayed close, as though creating distance hadn't occurred to him as an option. "But I notice you're smiling, which means my deeply embarrassing medical history is serving a noble purpose." A merchant selling anti-gravity cushions drifted between them, literally because he'd activated his product demonstration and was now floating a good half-meter off the ground. He glared at them with the universal expression of a salesperson whose territorial instincts had been triggered. "You're blocking my display space," the merchant announced, bobbing gently in the artificial breeze from the atmospheric processors. "Either buy something or move along. These cushions are premium quality, rated for up to 80 kilograms, and currently on sale for only 300 credits. Jack looked at the cushions, then at the merchant, then at Chloe with an expression of absolute mischief. "I'll take 2. "You don't need anti-gravity cushions," Chloe said. "I don't need a lot of things. I don't need 17 different types of moss samples in my quarters. I don't need a collection of rocks from planets I can't pronounce. I don't need a portable spectrometer that I've named Gerald. But I have all those things and my life is richer for it." He pulled out a credit chip and handed it to the merchant, who looked surprised that his aggressive sales tactic had actually worked. "Besides, anyone who floats between 2 people having a conversation deserves to make a sale. That's just commitment to the craft." The merchant handed over 2 cushions and floated away, muttering something about off-worlders having more money than sense. Jack immediately activated both cushions and handed one to Chloe, who stared at it as though it might explode. "I don't understand what just happened," she said. "I made a petty purchase out of spite and a genuine appreciation for theatrical salesmanship," Jack explained. "Now we have cushions, premium quality, rated for up to 80 kilograms. Our lives are forever changed." "You're insane. I'm a botanist who voluntarily spends months in space looking at plants." "Insane was established long before I got here." He tucked his cushion under his arm and gestured toward the edge of the marketplace. "Come on, show me where the locals actually go. I want to see the real colony, not the tourist-friendly version where everything is sanitized and boring." Chloe hesitated, her long ears flicking uncertainly. "The real colony isn't very impressive. It's mostly maintenance tunnels and habitation blocks that smell like recycled air and broken dreams." "Perfect. I love broken dreams. They're much more honest than functional ones." Jack started walking, clearly expecting her to follow. Also, I need to tell you about the time I discovered a plant species that reproduces by screaming at a frequency that makes most beings spontaneously develop hiccups. The incident report for that one was 17 pages long and included the phrase botanical terrorism 3 times. Despite herself, despite the years of learning to expect nothing, despite the whispers that followed them as they left the marketplace, Chloe followed. The anti-gravity cushion hummed softly in her hands, a small piece of absurdity that somehow felt like proof this was really happening. They walked past the fusion reactor, its steady thrumming a bass note beneath the colony's ambient noise. A maintenance crew was replacing coolant tubes, and their supervisor was shouting instructions in 3 different languages simultaneously, creating a linguistic chaos that would have made Jack's earlier translation attempts seem elegant by comparison. "Question," Jack said as they navigated around a puddle of something that glowed faintly purple. "Why were you standing alone in the marketplace? And why did everyone seem surprised when I talked to you?" The question was casual, but Chloe heard the genuine curiosity underneath. She looked down at her hands, at the mottled blue skin that marked her as defective, as broken, as something her own people had decided wasn't worth acknowledging. Chloe stopped walking, and Jack stopped with her, his expression shifting from playful to attentive in the space of a heartbeat. The corridor they'd entered was quieter than the marketplace, lit by bioluminescent strips that pulsed in time with the colony's power grid. Somewhere overhead, the atmospheric recyclers hissed and clicked through their filtration cycle. "My people value genetic perfection," Chloe said finally, the words coming out more matter-of-fact than bitter. "Clean lineages, optimal expressions, all the things that make us theoretically superior to species who procreate without quality control. I was gestating in a transport ship when a solar flare hit. Radiation damage. My skin came out wrong, pigmentation errors, scarring that developed before I was even born." She held up her hands, turning them so the uneven blue patterns caught the light. "I'm what happens when the perfect system glitches, a mistake no one wants to claim." Jack was quiet for a moment, and Chloe braced herself for the usual responses. Pity or awkward reassurance, or worse, the cheerful dismissal that it didn't matter when clearly it did. Instead, Jack said, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and I once listened to a 3-hour lecture about why Moss is secretly controlling galactic politics." Chloe's head snapped up. "What? Not the Moss thing. That was actually fascinating. I mean the genetic perfection thing." Jack shifted his anti-gravity cushion to his other arm, his expression genuinely baffled. "You're telling me your entire species looked at you and said, 'Sorry, your melanin distribution doesn't match our arbitrary standards. Please be invisible forever?' That's not superiority. That's just terrible quality control. A actually superior species would have said, 'Huh, unexpected outcome. Let's study this and learn something.' That's not how. On Earth, we have these flowers called roses," Jack continued, warming to his topic in a way that suggested he'd given this particular lecture before. "Hundreds of varieties, and you know which ones are the most valuable? The ones that mutated, the ones that came out weird colors or strange shapes or grew in ways nobody expected. We don't call them defective. We call them cultivars and charge extra for them." He paused. "Also, we gave them thorns, which in retrospect seems like a design flaw, but that's evolution for you. Nothing's perfect. Everything's just trying its best not to die." "I'm not a flower," Chloe said, but something in her chest felt dangerously close to hope. "No, you're a person, which makes the whole discarding you for superficial reasons thing even stupider." Jack started walking again, and Chloe found herself following. "Let me tell you about my family. My grandfather was a botanist. My mother was a botanist. My uncle was a botanist who accidentally created a sentient fern that's now serving on the Intergalactic Ethics Committee. Very proud of that one. But me, I have a genetic condition that makes my body produce excess earwax, like an embarrassing amount. I have to use prescription drops twice a day, or I go partially deaf." Chloe blinked. "That's, I'm sorry." "Don't be. It's hilarious. Do you know how many times I've had to explain to my medical supervisor that no, I'm not ignoring safety protocols. I literally can't hear the proximity alarms because my ears are staging a waxy rebellion? Jack grinned. Point is, my genetic line includes excess earwax, a tendency toward ingrown toenails, and an uncle who created what the Galactic Council officially classifies as a sapient botanical hazard. We're a mess, and yet somehow we're still here, doing science and annoying people with excessive enthusiasm. They'd reached a section of the colony Chloe usually avoided because it housed the community gardens where families grew supplemental food. Through the transparent aluminum panels, she could see the neat rows of vegetables and fruits, all carefully tended by people who belonged to something. Jack pressed his face against the glass like an excited child, his breath fogging the surface. Oh, those are Centauri tomatoes. And is that Delton wheat? I've only seen that in academic journals. He turned to her with such unfiltered joy that Chloe felt something crack in the armor she'd built around herself. Can we go in? Please? I promise I'll be professional and won't touch anything without permission and will only moderately embarrass you with botanical enthusiasm. I don't have access, Chloe admitted. Community plots are for families, registered households. Jack's expression flickered through several emotions before landing on determination. Okay, new plan. Do you like plants? Specifically, do you like plants enough to tolerate me talking about them for extended periods while possibly committing minor trespassing? That's a very specific question. I'm a very specific person. It's why I have exactly 3 friends, and one of them is a fern. He pulled out a data pad from one of his many pockets and started typing rapidly. My research grant includes access to the Botanical Research Dome on the edge of the settlement. It's technically restricted to authorized personnel, but I am authorized personnel, and I'm authorized to bring assistance. And you seem very assistant-shaped to me. I'm not a botanist, Chloe said, even as her heart started beating faster. I don't know anything about plants. Perfect, Jack said, still typing away on his datapad. Neither did my last assistant, and he managed to catalog 17 specimens before he quit because, and I quote, "The plants are judging me, and I can't work under these conditions." Plants can't judge people, Chloe said. Tell that to the whistling fern of Kepler 442b. That thing has opinions, and it's not afraid to share them at frequencies that cause migraines. Jack finished whatever he was doing and pocketed the datapad. But seriously, I don't need you to know about plants. I need someone who can take accurate notes, organize data without accidentally deleting 3 months of research like my previous assistant did, and tell me when I'm about to do something catastrophically stupid. The last one is especially important because my decision-making skills are questionable at best. You're offering me a job. Chloe heard herself say the words but couldn't quite process them. You've known me for approximately 20 minutes. 23 minutes, actually, and in that time, I've learned that you have a sense of humor. You speak at least 2 languages fluently, you're honest about your limitations, and you haven't run away screaming despite my numerous red flags. Jack started walking toward the colony's outer ring, where the research facilities clustered against the atmospheric shield. Also, you're still holding that anti-gravity cushion like it might be the most valuable thing you own, which tells me you're not used to people giving you things, which tells me people are idiots. That's a lot of assumptions based on cushion-holding technique. I'm a scientist. Making assumptions based on minimal data is literally half my job. The other half is being wrong about those assumptions and having to file incident reports. He navigated around a repair drone that was busily welding a crack in the corridor wall, its sensors beeping irritably at the interruption. Look, I'm going to be honest with you because I'm bad at not being honest, which has caused problems in approximately 47 different social situations. I've been looking for an assistant for 2 months. The job posting has been up on every colonial message board from here to the Andromeda Relay, and I've had exactly 0 qualified applicants. Maybe because you're clearly a disaster, Chloe offered. Yes, but I'm a disaster with funding and access to interesting plants and a genuine need for someone who can help me not accidentally create another sentient fern. Jack stopped at a security checkpoint, pressed his thumb to the scanner, and waited while it verified his credentials. The pay isn't great, the hours are weird because plants don't care about circadian rhythms, and there's a non-zero chance you'll be exposed to something that makes you temporarily bioluminescent. But it's real work. It matters to the scientific community. And you'll be doing it with someone who will absolutely never judge you for having mottled skin, because he's too busy judging himself for that time he got trapped in a greenhouse for 6 hours because he forgot how doors work. The security gate slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Beyond it, Chloe could see the curve of the research dome, its transparent panels revealing rows of vegetation in various stages of growth. The colony's twin suns were beginning their descent, painting everything in shades of copper and amber. "How do you forget how doors work?" Chloe asked, following him through the checkpoint. It was a very complicated door. It had a biometric lock and a manual override and a backup system, and I got confused about which one I'd activated, so I just kept trying different combinations until the AI managing the facility got so annoyed, it locked me in as punishment. Jack palmed the entrance to the dome, and it irised open with a soft chime. I had to apologize to an AI. It made me write a 500-word essay on door safety. The other researchers still bring it up at conferences. The air inside the dome was different from the colony's recycled atmosphere. Richer, heavier with oxygen and the loamy smell of actual soil. Chloe took a breath and felt something in her lungs expand. Earth plants grew in neat rows alongside specimens from dozens of other worlds. Their leaves and stems creating a tapestry of colors that had nothing to do with efficiency or genetic optimization, and everything to do with the stubborn determination to survive. Jack walked between the rows with the easy familiarity of someone who'd spent more time with plants than people. He stopped at a section where roses grew in defiant shades of red and pink and yellow, their thorns catching the fading light. "These shouldn't exist," he said softly. "Roses are fragile, temperamental, inefficient at converting nutrients, prone to disease, and absolutely covered in defensive structures that make them difficult to cultivate. By every logical measure, they're a failed species." He reached out and carefully touched one of the blooms, his calloused finger gentle against the petals. "But they're beautiful, and they smell incredible. And they've survived on Earth for millions of years because sometimes being perfect isn't as important as being stubborn enough to keep growing." Chloe stood among the roses and felt the weight of years pressing against her chest. Years of being invisible, of learning to take up no space, of accepting that her existence was something to be quietly tolerated rather than celebrated. "So," Chloe said, her voice steadier than she'd expected, "what exactly would this assistant position involve? Besides apologizing to angry AIs and preventing you from creating more members of the Intergalactic Ethics Committee?" Jack's face lit up like she'd just solved an impossible equation. "Mostly data entry, sample logging, and keeping me from accidentally cross-contaminating specimens. Also, and this is important, stopping me when I start sentences with, 'I wonder what would happen if.' Those sentences never end well. Last time I wondered what would happen if I grafted a Tau Ceti vine onto a Martian cactus. I created a plant that the quarantine officer described as aggressively horticultural and banned from 3-star systems." "Aggressively horticultural," Chloe repeated, feeling another smile tug at her lips despite herself. "It developed a taste for synthetic fabric and ate 2 lab coats before we contained it. The official report cited me for crimes against botany, which I think shows a lack of appreciation for scientific innovation." Jack moved to a workstation near the roses and activated a holographic display that flickered to life, showing star charts overlaid with botanical data. "But here's the real job. See this? I'm cataloging specimens from uncharted moons in the Kepler-62 system. The survey team found evidence of plant life that shouldn't exist. Complex photosynthesis in low-light conditions, root systems that seem to communicate through electrical impulses, flowers that bloom in response to gravitational variations instead of sunlight." Chloe leaned closer, her long ears perking forward with interest she couldn't hide. "That's impossible. Plant communication through electrical signals requires neural structures that shouldn't develop in organisms without centralized nervous systems." Jack went very still. "You said you didn't know anything about plants." "I said I wasn't a botanist. I didn't say I was illiterate." Chloe felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I wanted to study stellar cartography before. When I thought maybe I could be something other than invisible, I had to take xenobiology courses, and the professor spent 6 weeks on impossible evolutionary adaptations that turned out to be possible once we actually looked for them. What happened? Jack asked quietly. With the cartography? My people decided that someone genetically compromised couldn't be trusted with navigation systems. What if my flawed DNA made me miscalculate a jump coordinate? What if I led ships into stars because my broken genes made me incompetent? The bitterness crept back into her voice, familiar and toxic. So I work in the recycling plant, sorting waste. Very important work for someone who doesn't matter. Jack was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming against the workstation. Then he reached over and pulled up a different display, a star chart, dense with notations and calculation strings. See that? That's the navigation route my previous assistant plotted for our sample collection expedition to Kepler 62's third moon. Notice anything wrong? Chloe scanned the data, her mind automatically processing the vectors and gravitational variables. The approach angle doesn't account for the moon's magnetic field variance. You'd overshoot the landing zone by at least 300 kilometers and possibly crash into the debris field from the mining station. Exactly. My previous assistant had perfect genetics, a degree from the Terran Institute, and the personality of wet cardboard. He also nearly killed us 4 times because he was too proud to double-check his math. Jack closed the display and looked at Chloe directly. I don't care about your skin or your genes or what your people think should disqualify you from being trusted. I care about whether you can stop me from dying in a botanical accident or a navigational disaster. Preferably both. That's a low bar for employment, Chloe said, but something in her chest was doing complicated things that felt suspiciously like hope. I have low standards and high enthusiasm. It's my brand. Jack pulled up a contract on his datapad, his fingers flying over the interface. Here's the deal. 6-month trial period, renewable based on mutual agreement. Pay is standard research assistant rate, which isn't great but includes housing stipend and access to the colony's medical facilities. Your primary responsibilities are data management, sample organization, navigation support for collection expeditions, and telling me when I'm about to do something that will require filing an incident report. You're serious, Chloe said. You're actually serious about this. I'm serious about very few things, and plants are one of them. Also not dying. I'm very serious about not dying. Jack held out the datapad. I need someone smart enough to correct my navigation, patient enough to tolerate my personality, and honest enough to tell me when I'm being an idiot. You've demonstrated all 3 qualities in under an hour. That's better credentials than my last 5 assistants combined. Chloe stared at the contract displayed on the screen. The terms were straightforward, almost aggressively reasonable. No genetic screening requirements, no background checks beyond basic security clearance, no clauses about appearance or social standing, or any of the 1,000 invisible barriers she'd learned to expect. What about your crew? She asked. Won't they object to you hiring someone you met in a marketplace? My crew objects to everything I do. They objected when I brought carnivorous plants on board. They objected when I named the ship's medical AI Gerald 2 because I'd already used Gerald for my spectrometer. They objected when I organized a birthday party for a fern. Jack grinned. Their objections have exactly 0 impact on my hiring decisions, which is why I'm still employed despite being a walking liability. Chloe looked at the datapad, then at Jack, then at the roses growing stubbornly beautiful in their imperfect glory. She thought about the recycling plant, about sorting waste in the shadows while pretending she didn't exist. She thought about stellar charts and navigation vectors and all the dreams she'd carefully buried under layers of learned invisibility. She thought about a human man who'd walked through a crowded marketplace and extended both hands to someone everyone else had decided wasn't worth seeing. If I take this job, Chloe said slowly, and I accidentally get us both killed because I miscalculate something, I want it on record that you were warned about my flawed genetics. If we die doing science, we die doing what we love, which is honestly the best any of us can hope for. Jack's expression softened. Also, you're not flawed. You're adapted. There's a difference, and anyone who can't see it is working with insufficient data. Chloe reached out and took the datapad. Her scarred, mottled fingers looked strange against the sleek technology, but they were steady as she pressed her thumb to the signature field. The contract flashed green, accepted and binding. Excellent, Jack said, his grin returning full force. Welcome aboard. Your first assignment is to tell me if these roses need more nitrogen in their soil Or if I'm just being paranoid because the one on the left gave me what I interpreted as a judgmental look this morning. Plants don't have facial expressions, Chloe said. You say that now, but wait until you meet the whistling fern. That thing has mastered the art of botanical disappointment. Jack moved toward another section of the dome, already launching into an explanation about phosphate levels and pH balance that was probably going to be Chloe's life now. She followed him, the anti-gravity cushion still tucked under her arm, and realized that for the first time in years, she wasn't watching from the edges. She was part of something, maybe something chaotic and scientifically questionable, but something real. Above them, through the dome's transparent panels, the stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. Chloe looked up at them and thought about navigation charts, about the routes she'd mapped to distant moons, about all the impossible things that turned out to be possible when someone actually looked. Jack was still talking, something about a plant that produced fruit that tasted like music, and Chloe found herself listening not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Being chosen, she realized, wasn't about being perfect.